There's a gas moving through your blood vessels right now, and how much of it you have left is quietly deciding how fast your heart, your brain, and your skin are aging. It's not a supplement, it's not a drug. Your body makes it every single second, but starting somewhere in your late 30s, production starts dropping. By 60, most people are making a fraction of what they did at 20. The molecule is called nitric oxide, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to measure whether yours is running low, and the 3 things that move it back up, starting today. Here's what's coming. The one everyday symptom that's actually a nitric oxide warning sign, almost nobody connects to their arteries. The specific food category, not a supplement, that a Stanford research team found raised nitric oxide markers in under 3 hours. And the one common habit, still recommended by some dentists, that can shut nitric oxide production down almost completely. We'll get to all of it. But first, let's talk about why this molecule matters so much. In 1998, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine went to 3 American pharmacologists, Robert Furchtgott, Louis Ignarro, and Farid Murad, for discovering that nitric oxide acts as a signaling molecule in the cardiovascular system. That's not a wellness influencer claim. That's one of the most well-established findings in modern vascular biology, sitting quietly inside your biology textbook while most people have never heard of it. Since then, hundreds of studies, including long-running data from the Framingham Heart Study, have tied declining nitric oxide availability to the exact age-related conditions we're all trying to avoid: stiffening arteries, rising blood pressure, and slower wound healing. Picture the inside of a blood vessel like a garden hose. When it's flexible, blood moves through easily, pressure stays low, and every organ downstream gets what it needs. Nitric oxide is the signal that tells the muscle layer around that hose to relax and widen, a process called vasodilation. It's made by a thin layer of cells lining every blood vessel in your body, called the endothelium. Think of the endothelium as air traffic control for your entire circulatory system, sensing conditions and radioing out the widen up signal in real time. Here's the everyday sign most people miss completely: cold hands and feet that don't warm up easily, even in a warm room. It's often written off as just poor circulation or a sign of aging you can't do anything about, but it's frequently one of the earliest outward signs that the endothelium isn't producing enough nitric oxide to keep small vessels properly dilated. It's not a diagnosis on its own. Plenty of things cause cold extremities, but paired with the other markers we're about to cover, it's a clue worth paying attention to, not ignoring. So why does this system slow down as we get older? 2 things happen in parallel. First, oxidative stress, the accumulation of unstable molecules called free radicals, starts breaking down nitric oxide faster than the body can replace it. Second, the enzyme responsible for making it, called eNOS, becomes less efficient, partly due to a buildup of a compound called ADMA, which essentially jams the machinery. Combine those 2, and by the time most people hit their 50s, researchers estimate nitric oxide bioavailability has dropped by half compared to their 20s. That's not fear-mongering, that's the trajectory the research shows, and it's exactly why this matters more with each passing decade, not less. But here's the part that should change how you think about all of this. Unlike a lot of aging biology, this pathway is unusually responsive to input. Nitric oxide production isn't fixed by your genes and left there. It responds within hours to what you eat, how you breathe, and how you move. That's rare in biology, and it's the reason this topic deserves 15 more minutes of your time. Let's start with the mechanism a lot of people have heard about but don't fully understand: dietary nitrates. Leafy greens like spinach and arugula, along with beets, are naturally rich in inorganic nitrates. Here's the pathway. Your body converts dietary nitrate into nitrite, and specific bacteria living on the back of your tongue convert that nitrite into nitric oxide. Yes, bacteria on your tongue. This is why using strong antibacterial mouthwash twice a day, every day, has been associated in multiple studies with measurable drops in nitric oxide production. That mouthwash habit we teased earlier isn't hygiene neutral. It can be wiping out the exact bacterial colony your body depends on for this pathway. A team associated with Stanford's cardiovascular research programs measured nitric oxide-related blood markers, after a single serving of concentrated beet juice and found measurable increases within 2 to 3 hours, one of the fastest dietary effects on vascular markers documented in nutrition science. This isn't a eat healthy in general story, it's a specific, fast, testable pathway. Nitrates aren't the only lever. There's a second independent pathway involving polyphenols, the pigment compounds found in dark berries, pomegranates, and cocoa. Polyphenols support nitric oxide two ways. They act as antioxidants that protect existing nitric oxide from being broken down by oxidative stress, and some, particularly the flavonols in cocoa, appear to directly support ENOS, the enzyme we mentioned earlier that makes nitric oxide in the first place. This is why pomegranate extract has shown up repeatedly in small clinical trials measuring flow-mediated dilation, a standard test of how well arteries widen in response to increased blood flow, and one of the most direct human measures of endothelial function researchers use. Food is only 2/3 of the picture. The third lever surprises almost everyone: how you breathe. Specifically, nasal breathing versus mouth breathing. Nasal passages produce nitric oxide directly, and studies measuring exhaled nitric oxide have found levels 5 to 18 times higher through nasal breathing compared to mouth breathing. Chronic mouth breathing during the day or overnight may be quietly bypassing this entire production pathway. And then there's movement. Every time your heart rate rises during activity, blood moves faster across the endothelial lining, creating something researchers call shear stress. That mechanical force is one of the strongest known triggers for ENOS activity, meaning exercise doesn't just burn calories, it directly signals your blood vessels to produce more nitric oxide. This is part of why cardiovascular exercise has such an outsized effect on long-term blood pressure and arterial stiffness compared to almost any other single intervention researchers have studied. So we've got 4 independent inputs feeding one shared pathway: nitrate-rich vegetables, polyphenol-rich foods, nasal breathing, and movement that raises your heart rate. Each one supports nitric oxide through a slightly different mechanism, which is exactly why combining them, rather than picking just one, is where the research shows the biggest effect. That's the piece most single-focus advice misses. So let's name this properly and turn it into something usable. We call this the endothelial reset, a daily pattern built around the 4 inputs your endothelium actually responds to: nitrate foods, polyphenol foods, nasal breathing, and movement that raises your heart rate. 4 inputs, 1 pathway, and none of them require a prescription. Let's break down exactly how to apply each one. Step 1. Build 1 nitrate-rich serving into your day, ideally in the afternoon or early evening, rather than right before sleep, since digestion and the tongue bacteria conversion process take a few hours to complete. A cup of raw or lightly cooked leafy greens, spinach, arugula, or Swiss chard, or a small serving of beets, roughly half a cup, is the range used in most of the research showing measurable effects. One caution worth naming clearly: this pathway depends on oral bacteria, so avoid using strong antibacterial mouthwash within that window, and be cautious about using it as a daily habit at all if this pathway matters to you. Quick correction here, because this trips people up. Cooking these vegetables doesn't destroy the nitrate content the way it destroys some vitamins. Steaming or lightly sautéing spinach retains the majority of its nitrate content, so you don't need to eat everything raw. What does reduce nitrate content significantly is prolonged boiling in large amounts of water, since nitrates are water-soluble and leach out. Step 2. Add a polyphenol source most days, a small handful of dark berries, a piece of dark chocolate with at least 70% cocoa content, or a few ounces of pomegranate juice without added sugar. The research on flavanol-rich cocoa specifically used doses in the range of 30 to 40 grams of high cocoa dark chocolate, which is a modest, sustainable amount, not an excuse to eat an entire bar. The goal here isn't perfection, it's consistency. A small polyphenol source most days outperforms a large one occasionally, because the antioxidant protection needs to be present regularly to matter. I want to be honest with you about something here. None of this reverses damage overnight, and no single food is doing the heavy lifting alone. This is a slow, compounding pathway, the kind of thing where 3 weeks in you might not notice anything, and 3 months in, the change is real but easy to miss because it happened gradually. That's exactly how good vascular biology tends to work, and it's worth sticking with for that reason, not despite it. Step 3, practice nasal breathing during low to moderate exercise, and address mouth breathing at night if it applies to you. If you snore, wake up with a dry mouth, or know you're a mouth breather overnight, that's worth a conversation with your doctor or a sleep specialist. It affects more than nitric oxide, but this pathway is one more reason it's worth addressing rather than ignoring. During the day, simply noticing whether you default to mouth breathing during light activity or walking, light chores, and consciously shifting to nasal breathing is a free, immediate way to engage this pathway. Here's a simple way to check where you're starting from. Sit quietly and time how long you can comfortably hold your breath after a normal exhale without straining. This isn't a clinical test, but many breathing researchers use a version of it as a rough proxy for CO2 tolerance and nasal breathing efficiency. If you're consistently under 15 or 20 seconds, that's a signal your breathing pattern is worth paying closer attention to. Step 4, get your heart rate elevated through activity most days of the week. Brisk walking, cycling, swimming, anything that raises your breathing rate noticeably for at least 20 to 30 minutes. This is the sheer stress trigger we talked about earlier, and it's consistently one of the most studied, most reliable ways to support endothelial function long-term, independent of weight loss or any other benefit of exercise. You don't need high-intensity training for this specific pathway. Moderate sustained activity is what the research on endothelial function keeps coming back to. One important note before we wrap up the protocol. If you're on blood pressure medication, particularly anything in the nitrate family prescribed for heart conditions, talk to your doctor before significantly increasing dietary nitrate intake. This pathway interacts with those medications, and your doctor needs to be the one calibrating that, not a YouTube video. So to recap the endothelial reset, 1 nitrate-rich serving most afternoons, a small polyphenol source most days, attention to nasal breathing during the day and at night, and heart rate-raising movement several times a week. 4 inputs, 1 shared biological pathway, and a body of research, going back to a Nobel Prize winning discovery that's been building for over 3 decades. This isn't about chasing a single supplement or a miracle habit. It's about giving an aging system exactly what it's been asking for the whole time. None of what we covered today replaces a conversation with your doctor, especially if you're managing blood pressure, heart disease, or take medication that interacts with this pathway. What it does give you is a clearer picture of what's actually happening inside your blood vessels as you age, and a specific research-backed starting point instead of vague advice to eat healthier. That's the whole approach here. Translating what the research actually says without the hype and without the fear. If you tried the 15 to 20 second breath hold test earlier in this video, tell me your number in the comments. I want to see the range people are landing in, and I'll cover what different ranges tend to mean in a follow-up. Next, we're going deep on the specific blood test your doctor almost never orders by default that can tell you far more about your heart health than cholesterol alone, and exactly what to ask for at your next appointment. If this kind of research translation is useful to you, subscribing means you won't miss it. I'll see you in the next one.